Welcome back to Uncertain Times. This is a series I'm doing that I didn't know I was going to be doing 3 days ago. So here we are. I've got some amazing guests on this live stream for you. I even have all their biographies here. I will tell you about those first, and then we'll dig in. I'm Nick Nanton, and I know nothing about addiction. These guys know lots. So I will first go with my friend Joe Polish, who sparked the interest in me even hosting this. Joe Polish is the founder of Genius Network, one of the highest level groups in the world for entrepreneurs. He curates the annual Genius Network event, Genius Network, and Genius X, all three groups being home to some of the most successful entrepreneurs alive and is considered one of the most influential connectors in the world. I'll skip ahead on a few things. Joe's been featured on everything you can imagine. And Joe's mission, which is why we're here, with entrepreneurs and Genius Network, is to build a better entrepreneur. And his mission with Genius Recovery is to change the global conversation of how people view and treat addicts with compassion instead of judgment, and to find the best forms of treatment that have efficacy and to share those with the world. So that is Joe. Joe, welcome. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing great. Thank you so much.
Good, man. Awesome to have you. Dr. Ned Hallowell, founder of the Hallowell Centers, board-certified child and adult psychiatrist, ADHD expert, international speaker, New York Times bestselling author of the book Driven to Distraction. He's also been on everything from Dr. Oz to Dr. Phil, The View, all that fun stuff. And he is an absolute expert on ADHD in children, adults. Many of my adult friends visit him regularly to work on that. I probably should. And then finally, I got my brother here, Dr. Andrew Nanton. I know the most about him, but I'm just going to tell you the bio he told me to share. Andy's a medical doctor who trained at Tulane, Duke, and UC Davis. He's board certified in general psychiatry, child psychiatry, forensic psychiatry, and addiction medicine. He spent the last year in New Zealand setting up methamphetamine treatment clinics in the rural far north of New Zealand. So we have quite the panel here. Joe, I'm going to tee you up here first, and I'm probably going to play director mostly on this little software I've got. But so you and I were speaking the other day, and you made a comment that stuck in my head. You said, Nick, addicts are having a really hard time right now. In a lot of cases, they can't go to 12-step groups. They can't access the things they need. And it's sort of a pressure cooker right now for everyone, with the emotions running high, with 87 children in your home. You're trying to teach how to do homeschool, all of this fun stuff. Your whole life is on Zoom now. Tell me a bit about your concern for addiction right now, and sort of the work that you think needs to be done. We'll start there.
Yeah, that's great. And by the way, I'm not a doctor, so we got the doctors here that are way smarter at doctor stuff than me. And also, I have known Ned for, probably 20 years.
Yes.
And so, yeah, he is, which is great. And so you got some good resources here available. And just to let people know, I've been in addiction recovery for over 2 decades. I was a drug addict. I was a sex addict. And when I say I still consider myself an addict, because I believe addiction is a response to pain. And it's a solution. It's not a very good solution. It's a solution that has negative consequences. But in the moment of stress, anxiety, fear, loneliness, depression, drinking, drugs, gambling, sex, internet, anything that, creates a level of escapism works in the moment, but it has negative consequences. So during recessions, during wars, during stressful times in society, and certainly this is the first time in my life living in America that I've ever been through in the middle of a pandemic, vices increase on all levels. People, they look for escapism. They're stressed out, they're triggered, and so you'll notice addictions will massively escalate during the most triggering, painful times for people. So I think, like you had mentioned earlier, there are millions of people throughout the world, and people that aren't in addiction recovery in the area of 12 steps wouldn't even know this, that they go to meetings. They rely on meetings as their community to connect with others. And now when they can't do that, you're talking about taking away something that is a lifeline for so many people. Now, I've been on several virtual meetings for recovery over the last couple of weeks because they can't go into meetings in person now. And so more than ever, I think we have to find ways that we can connect with people in healthy, not unhealthy ways. I mean, even something I heard Ned say years ago, which is today we're more connected electronically with each other, but we're more disconnected as humans. And this is really interesting to witness this right now. And I don't want to talk too much in the beginning here. I just want to say that anything that I can share from my own life experience that will be helpful, I will certainly do. You can ask me questions about anything. I mean, I try to be as open as I can about this, not because, there's a lot of shame attached to my addictions, but what I found is you're as sick as your secrets, and fighting silent battles are the hardest battles to fight. So just us having a conversation about this, hopefully will allow some people, if they feel completely out of control, to, look for ways that they can connect with others, and because, stress hurts and hope heals, and that's what I hope we can provide here to some of the people. So thanks.
I love it. Joe, real quick, as we have anyone tuning in, what are the resources that you would recommend if someone's watching right now and they realize I probably am doing some unhealthy things, I'm having some addiction issues? What sort of resources would you guide them to really quickly before we move on?
Well, a Genius Recovery, which doesn't sell anything. I mean, I do have one book that I've written with Anna David and Hal Elrod called The Miracle Morning for Addiction Recovery, and people can listen to the audio version of this at Audible, or they can actually get this book on Amazon and download it, The Miracle Morning for Addiction Recovery. Genius Recovery has videos. It has links to all kinds of podcasts, many that I don't even know the people, but we have put resources together of people that have podcasts related to addiction recovery, and then every type of 12-step group on the planet. But right now, since so much of that is shifted, if people just look for, like, if they're an alcoholic or a drug addict or a gambling addict or a porn addict, you can find every form of meeting virtually right now all over the world where people can tap into, and you just type in, virtual, 12-step meetings, and you can find lists in every category that you could be struggling with. And I'm happy to talk more about that a little bit later if you'd like. But yeah, geniusrecovery.com is where I put things. Yeah.
Geniusrecovery.com. Cool. I will share that in the comments. Andy, as you're currently doing some work, inpatient work, it sounded like, in Montana right now. Talk about what you're seeing with your expertise in the past, and how addiction is, what's happening right now. Are people having problems connecting with doctors? Are a lot of doctors doing virtual treatments? Like, what's happening in that space right now? Andy, can you hear me? Well, I think I lost. All right. While we're waiting for Andy to go back, Ned, you're still live with me here. So Ned, you specialize mostly in adults and children and ADHD. Let's talk a little bit about how that shows up. We had a conversation, you and I, the other day about genetics and addiction and ADHD and itches you have to scratch. Would you repeat that whole philosophy for everybody for me?
Yeah, I mean, people who have ADD feel a natural need to change reality, to improve reality, to boost reality. Ordinary life just doesn't do it for us. So I have ADD myself. So we have to find ways to make ordinary life extraordinary. We have to find ways to increase the intensity of ordinary life. For the average person, they don't have to do that. We do. Ordinary life just doesn't grab us the way we need to be grabbed. And so we set about trying to find ways, what I call scratch the itch, at the core of ADD. Now, there are adaptive ways of doing that and maladaptive ways of doing that. And probably the most maladaptive ways is with drugs, alcohol, gambling, sex, spending, shopping, all the compulsive or addictive substances and activities. The adaptive ways of doing it, on the other hand, are wonderful. And that's why you find people with addiction also being incredibly creative. So finding a creative outlet is right at the top of my list. The reason I write so many books, I'm finishing up my 21st book. It's not that I'm ambitious to write books. If I don't have a book going, I get depressed. So, you need to have some kind of creative outlet. Most entrepreneurs have ADD because, once again, their creative outlet is growing their business, growing their project, whatever it might happen to be. That's an adaptive way of scratching the itch. That's an adaptive way of making ordinary life extraordinary. It's something that grabs you, something you look forward to getting out of bed to do. Another good way of scratching the itch is physical exercise, really good. And a third way, and sort of my mantra, is the human connection. So I say to people, never worry alone. And just because we're having physical distance these days, I prefer physical distance to social distance. We should not have social distance. So you can connect, as we're doing right now, using social media. You can connect with other people over online, a telephone, however you want to do it. And it's really important to do that. I call it the other vitamin C, vitamin connect. And it's as essential for our health and well-being as oxygen. I mean, we really die without it. Social isolation is lethal. It's as dangerous as cigarette smoking. So those three are at the top of my list of how to scratch the itch, adaptive ways of making life, vivid, meaningful, exciting, which those of us who are born with the genetic predisposition, both to ADD and to addiction, cope with. Find a creative outlet, physical exercise, and human connection.
Those are all great advice. Joe, as someone who has obviously a super creative person, you've found adaptive ways to scratch your itches, we'll say for now, with the things that you've done. Tell me what you had in your past. Talk a little bit about your past and some of the things that led you down the path of not of making those maladaptive choices that led you into drug addiction and a lot of the other things.
Yeah, well, what I would say, I mean, to powerful.
Hey, Joe, I messed up there for a second. You're going to have to start over. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, can you hear me?
I got you now. Yeah, that was my fault. You're good.
Yeah, what I was saying was what Ned was saying earlier about vitamin C connection. When you have disconnection, humans want to be connected. I mean, when you're disconnected from yourself, it's very hard to connect with others, and so you will look for other forms of doing it. Bill W., the founder of AA, had one very interesting line where he said, "As alcoholics are trying to drink God out of a bottle." And I often preface that by saying, even if you're an atheist, just what are you trying to connect with? So you're trying to drink your way to this connection, or, it's like in a lot of ways, any sort of addict, being a process addiction such as gambling or sex or work, because workaholism is a respectable addiction, or food. And then you've got, consumptive drugs and alcohol. Those are all trying to find a way to just feel okay. And if you're depressed or lonely or sad or anxious, there's nothing wrong with wanting that, to not want to be in that state. It's just how you go about scratching that itch, to use that analogy. So there are some ways that you can scratch the itch that will destroy your life, and and even the lives of others. And there's other ways that you can do it that are more healthy. So for me, where my addiction, I believe, stemmed was simply childhood. I mean, my mother died when I was 4 years old. I had a very painful childhood. I was raped and molested as a kid. I wasn't able to talk to anyone about that. I lived in this shame. I became a drug addict, started doing drugs around 16 years old. And by the time I was 18 years old, I was, freebasing cocaine, snorting crystal meth, smoking pot almost daily, cigarettes, drinking, speed, taking psychedelics. I mean, you name it. And I had never dealt with that, trauma earlier on. I mean, Ned, actually, one of the reasons I sought out even Ned, he had written a book called Crazy Busy years ago, and he's brilliant at, all of his books. When you're talking about resources, listen to Ned's books on audio, which you can easily download. Watch him, there's plenty of videos in Ned online that you can find, and read his books. I mean, he's amazing. And what Ned will speak to, and I'll even like to ask him to speak to this, there's people, I have ADD, I have ADHD.
We all do. Let's just get that out of the way.
Well, here's the thing too. A lot of people say to me, doesn't everyone have an addiction? And, everyone's addicted to something. Actually, I don't think so. I think some people have cravings, but some people have cravings that are so intense they can't control those cravings. And there's a difference. It's a craving state. It's the element of craving, where the craving is something that takes over and you can't control it. So it took many years for me. I never dealt, like, for years, I started talking about drugs and alcohol, but sex addiction, there's a lot of shame attached to that. And I had a guy that was 70-year-old gay man who I spoke with on the phone, never met him in person, who a friend in recovery had said, "You really need to talk to this guy." And he had said to me, his name was Wharton, and I've asked him if I could say his name out publicly. He's like, yeah. And he said that, the definition of intimacy, he gave me this definition of intimacy, his favorite one I ever heard. He said, intimacy is a mutual exploration of a shared safe place. Abuse is anything that takes away the safe place, and addictions are what we do to make ourselves feel good when we don't have a safe place. And so when you don't feel safe in the world, you are going to look for something, right? And when you're abused, self-abuse, abandonment, witnessing horrible things, I mean, there's going to be some societal trauma just from this pandemic. Just like you can point to, Nazi babies from the war and whatnot. I mean, there's some severe things that'll happen. So Johann Hari, who's written a couple of books, one of his first books on where he talked about addiction was a book called Chasing the Scream, the first and last days of the war on drugs. And he has a line that's become quite popular, which is the opposite of addiction is connection. And so I very much believe that to be true. So when Ned talks about connection, it's not just like, oh yeah, we should all be connected. I mean, it is critically important, because if you don't have connection with others or connection with some sort of source or something, you're going to look for maladaptive ways to connect. So I believe there's 4 ways that I've written about in the book, The Miracle Morning for Addiction Recovery, and that I talk about a lot, that I have found, not that I came up with, but just talking to wonderful, brilliant experts, including Ned, right? And Andy, of course, we just haven't known each other long enough, so I'm sure I can't wait to hear you talk. The first is community, because I've never seen a true addict, a real addict, out of control. I've never seen them get sober in isolation, right? So you need some sort of connection. Secondly, it's biochemical, which both you guys, the docs, will tell you. It's serotonin, it's dopamine, it's happy chemicals running through your system. 70% of the serotonin is made in the gut. If your microbiome is messed up, if you're eating super unhealthy foods, you're not going to produce very good happy chemicals. So it's biochemical. It's supplementation, the types of food you eat. The third, it's the trauma work. It's the underlying work. It's the therapy, somatic therapy, breathing, yoga, meditation, exercise, things that can get you into a flow state. And then the fourth thing is the environment, based on the rat park studies that Dr. Bruce Alexander did in the 1970s, where if you put rats in cages and when they're isolated, they will do drugs. They'll drink drug water over food, over sex, over sleep. But if you put them into a healthy environment, they won't drink the drug water. And I've actually spoken with Bruce Alexander on the phone. He's agreed to be in one of my addiction documentaries to talk about what he did with the rat park studies and whatnot. So those are the different areas. But for me, I've had to create lots of rituals. There's not just one thing that I've ever found that solves addiction. So when someone's like, I've got the answer, I mean, maybe in certain areas, but I think different people have different depths of trauma, different depths of addiction, and certainly the genetic stuff that Ned can speak to way more than I could ever hope to. So those are some of my thoughts for now.
Awesome. Andy, can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah.
Good. I didn't just invite you on to make you quiet and sit in the corner, although it would maybe be therapy for me from some of our past interactions. Andy's a couple years older than me, so I got the brunt of some of his frustrations as a kid. No. So, hey, I was asking before, what are you seeing as you're doing treatment? You're visiting currently we're doing work in Montana. You're normally in Portland. What are you seeing? Are people with addiction problems having a problem getting in and out of facilities right now? Is there a lot of Zoom treatment? Are people just isolating? What are you seeing in the marketplace right now with that?
So it definitely is harder to get in and get treatment. There's at any kind of residential treatment facility, unfortunately, the wait times are always longer than we wish they were. But what we're seeing now is that things are slowing down. I mean, everyone's being very careful about who's being admitted and when, and who's been screened. Do you have any symptoms, et cetera? And then with this sort of asymptomatic incubation period with COVID, it's even more complicated to know, who can go where safely. So that is more complicated. And then as both Joe and Ned were talking about before, a lot of the other things that would be healthier alternatives to using are more complicated. getting exercise, being outside, socializing with other people, making those connections, especially if you live in somewhere that is heavily densely populated. It's just difficult. It's not necessarily easy to have access to those things in the way that it once was. And then on top of that, you add the stress of a lot of people who have lost their jobs. It's very fortunate for people who can work from home and can use Zoom. But if you drive a forklift, you're not working from home. You're just not working. So, suddenly you're looking at someone who's facing serious stressors that we're all facing with regard to the pandemic and, the potential safety of loved ones and the real stresses of not being able to make ends meet. And then even if you have the money, do you have access to the stuff that you need locally, et cetera? So it's a very difficult time. It is a bit of a pressure cooker for people who are, especially in the depths of their addiction, and don't already have well-developed ways of managing what they need to get in order to stay sober.
Got it. Let me ask you this: while we're in this, what should we be looking for, I guess, in ourselves to see? Well, maybe this is beyond healthy behavior, or maybe it's beyond having just one extra drink because I'm holed up in my house. Or what might we be looking for in family members? Is it lack of returning our calls? Like, what should we be looking out for in ourselves, I guess, as well as in other people to try to help make sure we're just doing a good job being good citizens of those we love around us.
Well, a simple way of putting. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no. All I was going to say is I think it's a good time to just reach out to people that you care about in your life and ask them, are you okay? Are things okay? Because everyone has things going on in their life all the time, but especially now. Sorry, Ned, please continue.
No, I was just going to respond to Nick's question. A simple danger sign is if you can't refrain from doing something. If there's something you find you're unable not to do, you wish you could not do it, but you can't not do it. That's sort of the definition of a compulsion or an addiction. And then step two, is don't worry alone. Talk to somebody about it. And today, what Joe said is so true. We're living in a slow motion train wreck. We're being traumatized, and the solution, over and over and again, every study always shows it. The key to resilience is connection. The key to survival is connection, whether it's a concentration camp or an epidemic or traumatic childhood. I share with Joe traumatic childhood, and both of us came out smiling, and it's because of connection. We found connection. And so today, reach out, and we can, you can keep physical distance, but promote social connection. We're doing it right now. And thank God for the internet. Thank God for, social media. Thank God we have one another. So if you're feeling lonely is toxic. Lonely is bad for you, physically bad for you. Don't tolerate that. Reach out, connect, and find someone. And the same thing, if you feel like you have a compulsion or an addiction, talk to someone about it. That's the secret of AA. They replaced the drug of alcohol with the drug of fellowship, and fellowship is healing. It's just, and the beauty is it's free and it's infinite in supply. The sad part is people don't take it seriously enough. What we're doing right now is what the country needs. We need to be supporting each other, talking, commiserating. The poor people who are out of work. My God, what a heartbreak! They can't pay their bills. But instead of hand wringing, when you connect, you're problem solving. And instead of feeling hopeless, next thing you know, you've got hope. Next thing you know, you're solving the problem. Next thing you know, you're starting an online business from home. I'll bet you anything, this period will see the emergence of a whole bunch of online businesses for people who are out of work. They figure out ways to do it. Necessity is the mother of invention. And I get carried away because I feel so powerfully about this, but the force of connection is what will save us, and it is the key. It's what saved Joe and me. It's the key to survival against odds.
I love it. So I'm hearing Andy saying, look, just reach out and make sure people are doing okay. That's a simple question you can ask. Ned, make sure you're connecting with as many people as possible. A mutual friend of Joe and mine, Vern Harnish, actually met Vern through you, Joe. Vern was saying recently, he said, look, he helps business people, but I think the advice is great for everybody. He was saying, look, today is not, I think he sent it out on Monday. He said, today is not the day to read more business books or to search more blogs or answer more emails. He said, what you need to do is something very simple today. You need to talk to as many people as you possibly can. Ask them how they're doing. Ask them what pivots they're making in the business. How are they adjusting the challenges? And as you said, Ned, it starts to go from hand wringing to problem solving. I'd never heard it that way, but that's great. One and one often equals far more than two. Another thing I think is just really important for everyone is if there's something, either you're having an issue with addiction. Obviously, there's addiction hotlines and resources online. Reach out. A huge problem. I held a call yesterday because I haven't not seen statistics, but I guarantee you there's a huge spike in child pornography and child abuse happening right now. Unfortunately, a lot of live stream platforms sell tickets to this stuff and through sick individuals. And so if you're in that situation, well, please reach out. Try to find a way to get someone to help you, because while we're all isolated in our own homes, I'm in my quarantine space. I commented the other day that I've seen a lot of these people's quarantine spaces, and I'm starting to know who's a serial killer. But seriously, around all that, it's just you got to make sure, even though we are quarantined and isolated, there are still people out there ready to help you, willing to help you. There are resources there are places that if you had to go somewhere, I would guess there's some sort of hospital, or I don't know, hopefully there's somewhere you could go, but reach out and find out, because I don't want you just to sit there and think there are no solutions. You have to reach out and try to find, somewhere to go, someone to talk to. I think most importantly, the first thing to do, like you said, Ned, is to reach out and say, and if you're having a compulsion. Now, I think this is, well, Joe, I'll let you respond first. The doctors will probably have some sort of medical answer. Imagine that. But, a compulsion, so sometimes I feel at 11:30 at night that ice cream, I just can't stop hearing it call me from the refrigerator, and I think maybe I shouldn't, maybe I should. And then let's say I break down and I have the ice cream. It's happened a time or two that. How do I know? I don't think it's an addiction because I don't do it every day, or I don't wake up at 10 a.m. going, I've got to have that ice cream. But again, Joe, we'll start with you. But so I know a lot of people who drink a lot, but they don't think they have a problem because they don't wake up at 7 a.m., dashing for the vodka, but they still might have a problem. So Joe, we'll go Joe just in the order of my screen here, Joe, then Andy, then Ned. How do you know, Joe, if you have an addiction?
Well, first off, is your life working or is it not working? And what I mean by that, and people may have different areas where some parts of your life are working and other parts of your life are not working. I know some people that are incredibly successful in their relationships, but their health is really not in great shape, or people that have really great health, but they can't make other areas of their life work. And so I think a lot of it is just, are you experiencing pain as a result of the decisions that you're making? And one of the things that I do too, addictive behaviors, in my own experience, a lot of my addiction stuff, I had a ton of fun when I was drinking or having crazy, weird sexual stuff, or, partying, or, not having to worry about life responsibilities and just, making decisions that were, in the moment felt good. But in the world of sexual addiction, and sex addiction has probably, from a judgment standpoint, so much negative connotations when you hear the term sexual addiction, although there are most, there's studies that have come out of Europe that every kid over the age, not every kid, but most kids over the age of 13 spend an hour a day watching pornography, right? But no one talks about this stuff publicly. So when I talk about it publicly, I always feel kind of weird about talking about sexual stuff. There's a tremendous amount of judgment with it. In sexual addiction recovery, though, there's a term that some therapists and addicts will use called fantasy contamination, where you live in this world of fantasy as an addict. If I have that drink, if I stay up, if I eat that ice cream, there's this whole fantasy. We watch movies, we listen to music. We live in a world of fantasy but real life is boring in many ways. It's not a James Bond movie. It's just, in what Ned was saying earlier when he first started talking, addicts become pleasure deaf, where normal things like going for a walk or sitting and reading or doing things that quote unquote normal people, if there are such a thing as a normal person, do, to an addict, it's incredibly boring. You're looking for, higher sort of stimulation activities, which is fine if those high stim activities are productive and don't damage and destroy your life. But with fantasy contamination, we had a Genius Network member recently give a talk. He's a health guy, and he said, play the tape to the end, through the end, right? And in fantasy contamination, you want to think, okay, if I really eat this, ice cream right now and it's midnight, how am I going to feel in the morning? And there are things that you can train your brain to a degree to connect, not with the pleasure you're seeking in the moment, but what are the consequences of doing that? And I'll tell you, to go back to what Ned says, if you're truly an addict, don't think you're good. No matter, the more intellectual you are, the people that I have found that have the hardest time with addiction recovery are really smart people. The more intelligent they are, they think they can outwit this stuff as if it has to do with intelligence. It has nothing to do with this. This shit's in your nervous system. I mean, it takes over your being. And that's why you have to reach out and connect with other people, even 12 steps in a lot of ways. And I know a lot of people, when they hear 12 steps, they're anti-12 step. I mean, I don't love 12 steps. 12 steps, like many things, are tools. They're a tool of recovery. And the thing with 12 steps, so it's not an attendance program. It's a step program. That's why it's called 12 steps. So people that go to meetings, but they don't do the steps, don't get recovery like people that will attend the meeting and actually do the steps and get a sponsor and connect with someone else. So it's like going to a gym and saying, well, gyms don't work. You would never, well, if you don't lift the weights on the bench, if you don't do push-ups don't work. You can't just say, well, exercise doesn't work. If you exercise, it actually works. If you do the tools of recovery, you will get better, maybe not instantaneously. And you may go through a journey, but you have to engage in the same way that you have to engage your body. You have to engage your communication with other people. So when Ned is talking about, vitamin C is connection, and people don't take it seriously, he's absolutely right. I mean, what I'm saying right now, people are like, oh yeah, I've kind of heard that before. But someone posted in one of the comments, it says, let's see, Sharon, she said, I will make calls because of this. Thank you. That's a simple statement. I will make calls because of this. Thank you. But that's really important. There's someone out there suffering right now, fearful, scared, struggling, and a phone call from you just saying, how are you doing? Or I really care about you, or thank you for being in my life. You have no idea what that could do for another individual. So someone, like, I've gone to 12-step meetings myself, sat through a meeting, and then left triggered and acted out, right? But I've had someone at the meeting say, because you showed up at that meeting, I was able to stay sober today. So when people say meetings don't work, they may not always work for you, but your showing up for someone else may help them with their recovery. And that's why the mutual suffering of being an addict, and you're able to reach out with someone else and share that suffering in some bizarre way, actually helps reduce the cravings. It helps you connect. It helps you get out of your own crazy making mind. And feelings are not facts. You may feel like shit. You may feel depressed. You may feel hopeless. You may feel suicidal. But if you haven't killed yourself, if you haven't hurt someone, if you haven't taken that drink, you may feel terrible, but that doesn't necessarily mean your life is terrible. It just means in that moment you don't feel well. And no one's perfect. I mean, I like fast food. I like pizza. I like drinking. I like drugs. I like hookers. I like all that stuff. When I say like, I mean, it sounds crazy, but you'd be lying if someone says, oh, I don't like the reptile brain, carnal pleasures, and being kind of buzzed. Of course, there's a certain element of it feels good, but what I don't like, it's dangerous. It's destructive. It destroys my self-esteem. It isolates me from other people. So I used to put this Post-it note on my refrigerator that said, nothing tastes as great as being lean feels. And I would use that as a trigger to remind me, yeah, that thing tastes really good, but I really like what it feels like to be healthy too. And it's a tug of war sometimes. But when you're not doing it alone, the tug of war isn't so damn hard because you have other people tugging with you, if that makes sense. So those are my thoughts.
That's great. Andy, you want to follow up?
Well, to touch on something that Joe was just saying there, I think it is really important when people reach out to others and ask them, how are you doing? How are you feeling? And in keeping with his gym analogy, uh, working toward sobriety, just like going to the gym, is something that no one can do for you. And so when someone reaches out, that can mean a lot to a person, absolutely. But I think you also have to be careful when you do reach out to someone that you're worried about, that you recognize that there are parts of it that you can be there for, parts of it that you can support. You can be someone they can lean on, but there are some parts of it that are up to them, and that can be really difficult when it's a loved one, someone that you care about, and you really want the best for them, and you see how they're struggling, and you see the choices they're making and how destructive they are. For you to be able to square with yourself that there are some parts of that journey that they're going to have to do alone, or not necessarily alone, but that you can't do for them.
It becomes enabling at some point, is from what I hear most people have experienced with a parent or something that really wants to take the journey for somebody, and they're not, the child or the other loved one isn't willing to do it. A lot of times it ends up becoming enabling behavior. Is that true? Or
I mean, it can. It's not always true, but it's a very difficult line to walk, and it's almost always full of gray areas about, what is being caring and supporting and helping someone through a difficult time, and what is shielding them from the consequences that are going to get them to a point where they say, "I can't keep doing this. I've got to turn things around." And if there were easy answers, that this would be a much shorter conversation. But for every person in every situation, it's a little bit different, and so it just isn't clean cut, and that's a real struggle for people who are close to others struggling with addiction.
Ned, what's your take on this?
Well, I was just thinking, back to what Joe said at the beginning, that addictive behaviors is sort of a response to pain, and I think now we're all feeling pain, and I have a 3-step handy dandy toolkit for dealing with what I call toxic worry. And, there's good worry, which is your problem solving. And we're all worried now. If we're not worried, we're not paying attention, so you want to be in the problem solving mode. So how do you get there? Well, 3 steps, and much better than Prozac, believe me. Step 1, never worry alone, connect. Okay. Then step 2, get the facts. Toxic worry is rooted in wrong information or lack of information or both. So get the facts. And, these days facts, you have to sort through the wheat from the chaff, and then based on those facts, step 3, make a plan. And, if your plan doesn't work, well, that's what life is all about. Revise the plan. Nobody's plan works. We all die, so, but on the way to death, we're revising plans all the time, improving plans. So never worry alone, get the facts, make a plan. And when you have a plan, you immediately operate on the 2 variables that cause toxic worry: a heightened feeling of vulnerability and a diminished feeling of control. When you have a plan, you feel less vulnerable and more in control. The external reality hasn't changed, but your having a plan changes how you feel about it. And that with that comes confidence, and with confidence comes effective action. So never worry alone, get the facts, make a plan, and just keep repeating that, and you'll be at your best. And instead of cowering in the corner, feeling incredibly vulnerable and out of control, which is how a lot of people are feeling these days. Incredibly vulnerable and no control. So do those 3 simple steps: connect with another person, get the facts, make a plan, and just keep doing it every day. I think we're all inventing strategies. We're all finding our way in the dark kind of thing, and we're inventing strategies every day, which is good. We're getting creative. We're discovering the inner entrepreneur, and that's the good news in all of this.
So next, I think we should talk about Tiger King. No, I'm just kidding. We shouldn't talk about that at all. So
I haven't seen it yet, so I mean, I guess I got to watch this damn thing.
Joe, it is. I mean, of all the shows I've seen in my life, this is like, this guy wasted 5 years of his life documenting this, and it's mind blowing. All right, so anyway, our mutual friend Joe, Jack Canfield, in the documentary I made on him, he says, we have to remember our goal is not to get from here to death with nothing bad happening. Like, I made it. Oh, wait a minute. That's like that's not really what we're trying to do. Joe, business people, I think this is a big concern right now. So obviously there's a large sector of the marketplace that is, employed employees. That's not typically who you and I work with. We work mostly entrepreneurs. I think I know from the moment this started hitting, I started feeling like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to my business? I don't know. I don't have, 3 months of cash to burn. And the moment I picked up the phone and started talking to other entrepreneurs, I found out that I have one friend who owns a business that's worth $2.1 billion. I actually talked to him like a week and a half ago, like the day or two before they started shutting down, even like, I don't know, New York or California. And I called him to sort of see what a guy like him was doing during this. And I said, man, we're burning cash fast. He goes, me too. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess, you're just burning cash at larger scale. They have like 15,000 employees that were about to be able to do nothing, and they didn't want to unemploy them. And it's like, so I think it's really important for everyone to understand, like, we are all in the same boat to some extent. Now, we all have differing outlying conditions or concerns. It's the same thing sort of with the disease. If you have pulmonary issues, you're probably more, you might want to watch out a little more closely. Or if you're over 60 or whatever they're saying, you have pre-existing conditions. That sort of exists in business too. But I found connecting with other business people, we've come up with creative solutions, creative ideas, and I just feel a whole lot better. You even hosted your first ever 2 days of a Genius Network, your meeting completely remotely. What are you seeing in the entrepreneur marketplace, and what would you say to those who are watching this who are still feeling isolated or embarrassed because they're not sure how they're going to make that payroll or whatever else is coming up and mounting on them?
Yeah, well, I think this would apply to almost everyone, because we're, at the end of the day, if we're an entrepreneur and we're employing people, or we have a job or a career, we are certainly the CEO of our own life, right? And so part of this is, I just did my first virtual Genius Network meeting yesterday and the day before, standing here in this room. And we did a survey on our entrepreneurs to ask, where are you at? Green light, you're okay. You're not broke. You're not losing everything. You've got some stability. I mean, I don't know anyone that's not been negatively impacted by this, like anyone. I mean, unless you own Zoom or something, where the stock is going up. But even they're dealing with like this onslaught of crisis of all these people now using the platform. I mean, so even the people that are selling a lot of things, if you happen to be in the toilet paper manufacturing business, you're still in a shit show, right? So the bottom line is we are in the same boat to that degree. And what Ned said about being solution focused is a good form of worry. I don't know anyone that's not worrying to what degree. It's just a matter of if it's toxic or not. We did a red light, yellow light, green light survey. Red light is I'm losing my business. I don't have enough money. I don't know what to do. For my clients, there's a handful of those, because I've pretty successful clients. I target a pretty high-end group, but also the vast majority of people that utilize what I put out into the world, I don't charge for it. My podcast and all that stuff, I put it out for free. So I have people that have lost millions. Their businesses have been decimated. They're crying every night. And these are leaders, men and women, that, they would show up and they're the king and queen of the kingdom. And all of a sudden the kingdom is gone. It's decimated, right? And so now they're having to tap into a resourcefulness in both of you guys. Andy and Ned have been talking about finding that within yourself, necessity's mother of invention, right? Or whatever. We have to be able to be resourceful. And now more than ever, people, not out of choice, but out of circumstance, are going to have to either be left with, I'm going to be resourceful, or I'm going to break down and let everything unravel and lose my shit. And it's okay to cry. It's okay to have a certain level of meltdown and grief and mourning, because there is loss. There is real loss here. It's just the vessel that you do it in, and how you can best protect yourself so you don't sink the ship. You're just able to go through, but everyone's going to go through a level of rocky areas. So the best that I can say, and I don't have all the answers, I mean, at all. I mean, I am confused. I am apprehensive. I have fear. I don't want to have to let my team members go, because I have people that work for me that have families and they have kids, and their livelihood is dependent on me. And at the same time, we've communicated that if we have no idea how long this is going to go, and it's not, I don't have an unlimited supply of cash where I can just pay if there's no revenue coming in. And when revenues come to a screeching halt, you got to make decisions. You have to make decisions. And I think the most important thing is bond with your team members, bond with your clients. Don't not communicate. Communicate the best you can. Even if you don't know what it is to say, you say, I don't really know the answer to that. There's one of these gaping void images. It's over to the left. I don't know if you can see it over here. It says don't react, respond. And let me say it this way. When I was going through one of the most grief-stricken times of my life in 2016, I had an ending of a relationship that was very painful for me. And I hired a yoga instructor to do private yoga sessions with me. And she said something that I'd heard before, but I'd never taken it seriously. She said, if you do yoga 3 times a week, it'll change your body. If you do it every day, it'll change your life. And I thought, I wonder what would happen if I did yoga every day, right? Not like just a 20-minute YouTube video, but if I did yoga for an hour, 90 minutes every day. And so for an entire month, I did 31 days of yoga, and then I took a day off, but I kept going. And over a 90-day period, I did like 82 or 83 sessions of yoga, either an hour to an hour and a half a day. And I'm a busy guy. I mean, I'd travel and all kinds of stuff, but I still made that commitment. And what it did to my body, I really understood that saying, the issues are in the tissues. And it wrung out like a level of pain and grief. And I'll tell you right now, when I'm like, shit, what I do? I either do some Wim Hof breathing, I do meditation, I do push-ups, I do burpees, I do yoga. And it's amazing what that, and then when I'm in a responsive state versus a reactive state, when I was an out of control addict, my whole life was reacting to everything with anger or rage or loneliness or pain or fear. And when I'm responding to life, I tend to just make better decisions. And so when you're reaching out and communicating and you're losing your mind, who can you speak to that can actually be that voice of reason? Or, and like what Andy was saying, you can't expect someone to run your life for you. What you can do, though, is you can be a companion with someone. You can sit and listen to them. And almost all addicts, and I'm sure Ned and Andy would speak to this in whatever ways, codependency, like, Ken Richardson is a friend of mine. He literally started CODA meetings, Codependence Anonymous. He took the 12-step model from Alcoholics Anonymous and applied it to codependency. And I don't know any addict that is not codependent. There's that level of stuff where you just try to caretake for other people. And a lot of very sensitive, nice, sweet people struggle with addiction because they try to caretake for everybody else. And I don't quote the Bible too much. There's a verse that says you can't fix the world with broken hands. And if your hands are broken, you have to heal them in some way. It's the whole, more than anything, you got to put on your, you have to put on your oxygen mask first. Everyone's heard that a million times. People, you hear it on airplanes when we used to be able to fly. Remember those days? And, you hear it in speakers talking about it. But really right now, if you're not getting enough oxygen in the form of connection or food or sleep or whatever, you're going to seek out ways to self-soothe. So more than ever, to go back to the question about entrepreneurs, I've used this analogy with my successful entrepreneurs. I said, if you owned a racehorse and it was $1 million racehorse, and every time that horse ran a race and won, you'd win $1 million. How would you treat that horse? You wouldn't shove fast food down its throat. You wouldn't sleep deprive it. You wouldn't have the horse running on a track with nails and broken glass. You would have the best food, the best sleep, the best trainers, the best rejuvenation for that horse, because if that horse is well taken care of, it's going to win races. And I'd say you're the $1 million racehorse. So if you're not treating yourself as if you are, then you can't expect to do well. And really, that analogy right now, I hope people can take that seriously in their own ways, even if they're cooped up in a tiny little house or, you know, I mean, I feel so bad. I'm seeing people on the streets that are homeless that have never been homeless in their life a week ago. And there's a lot of pain out there. There's a lot of struggles. So to whatever degree you can keep yourself together, the world more than anything not only needs each other, but they need you to be in the best state you can so that you can be as helpful for, because there's always someone out there that's worse off than you. And as weird as it sounds, if you're feeling suicidal, if you're feeling hopeless, reach out to someone who's in a worse state than you. And trust me, if you can share your experience, your strength, your hope, you both will start feeling better, and you can get back to what Ned says about being solution focused, even when you feel there is no solution. But there always is a way to make things a little bit better.
Three quick insights from there, Joe. First of all, Andy and my mom says that's great advice, and with the potty mouth you've shown so far in this show, I'm surprised that she hasn't smacked you. Number two, you're lucky I'm not Joe DeSena, because I would make you do 30 burpees right now, and we'd all have to do them together. So you're lucky that. And the only other public service announcement, because I've flown about 1,000,000 times and I never really noticed till recently, I want you guys all to pay attention. If the plane goes down, those vest things, do not inflate them until you get out of the plane. I didn't really realize the danger of that until I thought it through. So that is my announcement for today. And we're going to wrap up here in a couple minutes, but I'm finish up here with Andy and Ned. Andy, a lot of what Joe was talking about was obviously coping mechanisms. One of the things that I've done some sort of deep study, and Joe and I visit with Dan Sullivan a lot, strategic coach, amazing guy. He has a whole day you can spend on learning what your unique ability is, what you're great at, and what you probably should never do again. And one of the things that I realized when I stopped to think about it was how many coping mechanisms I had created in my own life to get past things that I just wasn't good at. And so there were things I'd never thought about until I was questioning, like, well, why would you do it that way? Well, I don't know. And so I dug into it. Talk a little bit about maybe coping mechanisms, as well as what people should do, because 12-step groups, maybe they're meeting on Zoom right now, but maybe a couple steps, things people can get involved in right now, even while we're in quarantine.
Well, I think I'll keep with the gym analogy for coping skills, because just like any other habit, you have to practice them to get better at them. And when people are addicts, one of the analogies that I sometimes use with patients is that, if you break your leg, then it's that cast that's holding your leg up. And have you ever seen anyone have a cast removed from a broken leg, and when they come out, their leg is skinny and emaciated, and it's just not strong? And that's a little bit what it's like when you take those substances away from someone who's been using that as their main coping skill. Those coping skills are atrophied. They're not strong and ready. They haven't been exercised. And so you take that cast of substances off, and then all of a sudden it's time to, it's very frustrating for someone who gets that cast off, and they say, well, I can't run like I used to run. Well, no, you can't. And you got to give yourself a little bit of patience. You got to be compassionate to yourself to say, I do need to practice this. I do need to work on it. It is going to be difficult, but it is going to get better. Someone who gets a cast off of their leg 6 months later, almost always it looks exactly like the other leg. But it takes some time, and you have to get there, and you have to put in the work to get there. Again, now that your choices for coping skills are a little more limited in terms of what people can do, I hope people can extend a little bit of compassion to themselves that, yes, it is going to take time, but it will get there, and they will get better.
Awesome. Ned, why don't you wrap us up with your thoughts on all of this, and then maybe you can fix our ADHD.
Well, that cast made me think of the itch, and how we use coat hangers to scratch down in there when we've got the cast on, and how great it feels when it finally comes off. And our cast will come off. This thing will come to an end, and we'll be able to take the cast off. But meanwhile, I just encourage folks, again, to connect above all else. And then in doing that, allow your unconscious to come forth, allow your imagination to flower, allow yourself to start an online business, or, forgive someone you've been feuding with. And, forgiveness is really good for the soul. Forgiveness is a gift you give to yourself, and purify your soul. Yoga, Joe was saying, detoxify your inner life. Use this time to do that. Get rid of grudges, make up with people, reach out to people. and it used your creativity. I mean, we've all got it. If you want to tap it, engage in play. And my definition of play is any activity in which your imagination comes alive. And so, ask on open-ended questions. Then you're at play. Where am I? Where am I headed? Then you're instantly at play, and that's when your unconscious will come out. This is a time, yes, of worry, but turn that toxic worry into constructive worry, problem solving, invention, creation. Play with each other. And nobody in the world is better at play in the best sense of that word than Joe Polish. I mean, the guy is just amazing, and nobody's better at connecting than Joe Polish. So take a lesson from Joe. Be Joe for a while, and and open and transparent and creative, and that's when the cast comes off. Your leg will be strong if you do it that way. Definitely we're in it together. We need each other, and together we will get through this. That's for sure. No doubt about it. I thank you guys for giving me the chance to participate in this. It's been a lot of fun.
Oh, no, it's been awesome. It's been great to have you guys. Thanks, Joe, for sparking the idea. Hopefully you guys who are watching have enjoyed the conversation. We will do more of these, I'm sure, at some point. Check out Joe at Genius Recovery and Genius Network, Dr. Ned Hallowell at just Google him, Dr. Ned Hallowell. You'll find lots of stuff. Andy, anywhere special they should go to learn about you?
Park Dietz and Associates is where I'm doing my expert witness work through. So check it out there.
Sounds good. And thank you guys all for tuning in. Thank you guys for your time. I appreciate it. You got anyone watching, if you are having an issue, have a problem, reach out to any one of us, or if you're having a major issue, reach out to the appropriate helpline or help center right now. Don't wait. And then everyone else, make sure you connect. Vitamin C, Dr. Ned, make sure you connect with everyone around you. Just pick 5 or 10 people, make a list every day, check in on 5 or 10 new people every day. You'll be shocked at how happy people are to hear from you right now. And you'll be shocked, by the way, at how easy it is to reach anybody. Literally everybody is on lockdown. On Tuesday of this week, I'm having an Ask an Astronaut live stream because I have 2 friends who are astronauts and they're not doing anything. So they're going to come online and answer questions for kids. Like, think about creatively, what can you do during this time? I'm not doing anything. So, I mean, I'm trying to help manage homeschool and other fun things, but we're going to do Ask an Astronaut coming up on Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Thank you all for joining me, and I'll see you all soon. Thanks to everyone. Take care.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Nick. Take care.